The mansion was eerily quiet that morning, too quiet for a home where two young children lived. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Robert Harrison, the billionaire owner, stood in the doorway, his leather briefcase in hand, frozen. He had just heard something, a sound so soft and delicate it barely reached his ears. It was the word mama. His sons, Christopher and Matthew, both 4 years old, had never spoken before. Not a single word. Not in all their years of life. But now, in the silence of the grand living room, it happened. The sound came again. Mama. Robert's breath caught in his throat. His briefcase slipped from his fingers and landed with a dull thud on the marble floor. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. In front of him, his twin sons, Christopher, with his dark brown eyes and full head of curls, and Matthew, with his lighter skin and quiet gaze, were sitting on the cream-colored carpet. Their heads turned toward the woman who knelt in front of them. Diana, the housekeeper. She was dressed in her usual plain gray uniform, her rubber gloves still on from cleaning. She had her arms stretched out toward the boys, her voice soft, almost trembling as she spoke to them. "It's all right, sweetheart," she whispered, her eyes never leaving the boys. "I'm right here with you." Robert couldn't process what was happening. His sons, who doctors had said would never speak, were forming words. They were calling Diana, the housekeeper, Mama. His head spun and his chest tightened. For 4 years, doctors and specialists had told him there was no hope for his sons. They had been born with severe cerebral palsy, paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to move. The doctors had told him it was a miracle they were even alive. But here, in his own home, something impossible was unfolding right before his eyes. The sound of his sons' voices, words they had never spoken, filled the air. "Mama," they said again, this time louder, more clearly. Diana had not noticed him standing there. She was focused entirely on Christopher and Matthew, her face full of tenderness. Robert's mind raced. He didn't know what to do, what to think. He had always seen his sons as a project, something to fix. Money and medical treatment had always been his answer. But now, this, a moment that no amount of money could explain. He felt like the ground was giving way beneath him. The life he had built, the empire of wealth and success, suddenly seemed hollow. It meant nothing in the face of this moment. His sons were speaking to a woman who had been hired to clean their floors, a woman he had barely paid attention to. Diana had done what money and medicine couldn't. His sons. His heart swelled, but with it came a rush of confusion and fear. He took a step into the room, but his legs felt heavy, like he was wading through thick mud. He couldn't take his eyes off Diana, who was still kneeling in front of the boys, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "What's happening here?" Robert finally whispered to himself, unsure whether this moment would change everything or tear apart the fragile world he had built for his sons. But Diana didn't hear him. She was too focused on the children, coaxing them gently with the same quiet affection she always had. She was their mother in ways Robert had never been. As Robert watched, the sound of his sons' voices grew louder, more confident. The twins were trying, struggling with every ounce of their being to speak. "Mama," they said again. And again, Robert's heart shattered. He couldn't breathe. This was real. It was happening. But the question remained, could this be fixed? Could their world, so carefully controlled by him, withstand the shock of this new truth? The room was silent again, but this time, it wasn't the quiet of an empty mansion. It was the silence of a man trying to understand what had just happened in front of him. Diana looked up at Robert, her eyes wide with surprise. She stood up quickly, as if realizing she had overstepped some invisible boundary. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't mean to." Her voice faltered, and Robert noticed how scared she seemed. But there was something else in her eyes, something he had never seen before. Confidence. Love. For his sons. She didn't know it, but in that moment, she had changed everything. The next few days were a whirlwind for Robert. He had made the decision to be present for his sons, to start being the father they needed. But even with this new resolve, there was something in the back of his mind, a gnawing feeling that kept him awake at night. He had been so focused on his business, on building his empire, that he had never truly faced his own past. Robert found himself walking past the boys' room more frequently, catching glimpses of Diana's patience as she worked with Christopher and Matthew. She was always there, always steady, always believing in them. But what Robert didn't know was that Diana wasn't just showing up for the twins. She was also showing up for herself. One evening, as he sat in the study, Robert found himself unable to concentrate. His mind kept wandering to the same thought. What had led Diana to care so deeply for his sons? Why had she stayed? What was her motivation? Unable to shake the question, Robert decided to ask her. He made his way to the medical wing, where he found Diana working with Christopher. She was holding up a bright yellow ball, making playful sounds as she encouraged him to reach for it. Diana, Robert said, his voice gentle but firm. Can we talk? Diana looked up, surprised by the interruption. She smiled, but there was a slight tension in her eyes. She had grown accustomed to Robert's distance, to the way he observed from afar, never truly involved. She wondered if something had changed. Of course, she said, setting the ball aside and giving him her full attention. Robert stood there for a moment, uncertain. He wanted to ask her everything. But how could he? How could he pry into the life of someone who had given so much of herself without asking for anything in return? Why did you stay? He asked suddenly. The question was out before he could stop it. Diana blinked, caught off guard. Stay. Yes, Robert said, his voice softer. You've been here for years, taking care of my sons. You've given them your time, your love, your belief. But why? What kept you here all this time? Diana's expression softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Robert hadn't noticed before. She looked at Christopher, who was now staring up at her with those big, bright eyes, and her heart swelled. She had never once thought about leaving. She never thought about asking for more. But now, in the quiet of the room, she realized that Robert had never truly understood her commitment. I stayed because I saw them, Diana said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. I saw more than just their condition. I saw two little boys who needed love. Not pity, not a cure. Love. And I saw myself in them. Robert furrowed his brow. What do you mean, you saw yourself in them? Diana hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window. When I was a child, I wasn't seen. I grew up in a world that never gave me a chance to show who I really was. People only saw what I couldn't do, never what I could. And it hurt. It still does. But when I looked at Christopher and Matthew, I saw that same invisibility. They were trapped inside their bodies, unable to show the world what they were really capable of. Just like I was. Robert felt a knot form in his throat. He had always known Diana had a quiet strength, but he hadn't known the full depth of her story. So you stayed because of your past? He asked softly, his heart aching for her. Because you understood what they were going through. Diana nodded. I stayed because I wanted to help them see themselves, to show them that they matter, to show them that they're worth loving. I couldn't walk away, not when I knew what it felt like to be invisible. Robert's chest tightened. He had never understood. He had always thought of himself as someone who provided, someone who took care of everything. But now, standing here, he realized that taking care of someone wasn't just about money or resources. It was about seeing them, truly seeing them. I'm sorry, Robert said quietly. I never realized what you were doing for them. For me. Diana shook her head, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You don't have to apologize. You've been through so much, Robert. You didn't know how to be present. But you're here now, and that's what matters. Robert stood there, his mind racing. He had been so consumed by his own failures, by the pressure of being a father without knowing how, that he had never stopped to look at what Diana had been doing. She had been their mother, their caregiver, their protector. She had been everything he hadn't been. And that's when it hit him. The real reason why his sons had called Diana Mama. It wasn't just because she had been there for them. It was because she had loved them in a way he hadn't. She had believed in them when no one else did. I've been so wrong, Robert whispered to himself. I've been so wrong. Diana reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and comforting. It's okay, she said gently. You can't change the past, but you can change what you do now. Just as Robert was about to respond, the door to the medical wing opened, and the nurse walked in. She glanced at the two of them, then at Christopher, who was now attempting to reach for the yellow ball again. I just wanted to check on the boys, the nurse said, her tone neutral. But there was something in the way she glanced between Robert and Diana that made Robert pause. He knew something was shifting in the house. Something was changing. The lines between employer and employee, between father and caregiver, were blurring, and Robert wasn't sure how to handle it. Over the next few weeks, something in the house began to shift. The mansion, once cold and echoing with silence, now filled with soft laughter, gentle words, and attempts at new sounds from the twins. Robert was spending time on the floor with Christopher and Matthew every morning, repeating words, pointing to objects, helping them stretch their little legs. Diana guided him the whole way, her hands steady, her voice patient, her eyes warm. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. But not everyone liked the change. Whispers began among the staff. Why is the housekeeper giving orders now? Why is the boss always with her? You think something's going on between them? People talked, and talked fast. But the person who stirred the most trouble was Yvette, the night nurse. A woman who had always believed that she should have been promoted, she should have been recognized, she should have had authority. And now? She watched Diana, with jealousy burning behind her eyes. One afternoon, Diana and Robert took the boys outside again. It was a warm Atlanta day, the sun glowing golden on their skin. Diana held Christopher close, while Robert carefully lifted Matthew, supporting his head gently the way Diana taught him. The twins' hair shined in the sun, soft curls for Christopher, lighter reddish-brown waves for Matthew. Their brown eyes sparkled with wonder as they watched birds fly overhead. "Sky," Christopher said softly. "Yes." Diana beamed. "Sky? You remember." Matthew pointed at a butterfly and laughed. A full, warm laugh that made Robert's heart almost collapse from joy. But from the upstairs window, someone was watching, face stiff, lips tight. Yvette. And she wasn't smiling. That evening, as Robert helped feed the boys in the medical wing, something unexpected happened. Matthew lifted his little hand and placed it on Robert's cheek. It was the first time he had ever reached on his own. Robert froze. His heart stopped. Then Matthew whispered, "Dad, stay." The whole room went quiet. Robert's throat closed. His eyes stung. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Diana smiled, but her smile was also soft. Sad. Tired. Robert noticed. "You okay?" he asked gently. Diana exhaled, sitting down slowly. Her hands trembled slightly. "Robert, I haven't been honest about something." Robert's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Diana looked up at him, eyes deep with a pain he had never seen in her before. "I wasn't supposed to be a housekeeper," she said quietly. "I didn't come here just looking for work. I came here because I already knew your sons." Before she could finish, the medical wing door swung open. Yvette stood there, face red with anger. "Mr. Harrison," she said loudly, voice shaking, "you need to see this." She held up her phone. A video was playing. A video of Diana in the boys' room, alone, late at night, talking to them, holding them, crying over them, telling them she loved them. But that wasn't the shocking part. In the video, Diana said words that stopped Robert's heart. "I will never let anyone take you away from me again." Again? Again? Robert's blood ran cold. Yvette stepped forward. "I told you," she said. "She's hiding something. She's been hiding something big." Robert slowly turned his eyes toward Diana. Her face was pale. Her hands shook. And for the first time since he had met her, she looked afraid. The room fell quiet. No one moved. No one breathed. Diana just stood there, her hands shaking, while Robert stared at her like the floor beneath him had disappeared. The twins looked confused. They didn't understand the tension, but they could feel it in the air. Robert's voice came out low. Not angry, just hurt. He asked, "What did you mean when you said again?" And Diana, she broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. She broke the quiet way people do when they have held pain inside for too long. Her voice was soft. She said she had lost children before. Twins. A boy and a girl. Born early. Born weak. Just like Christopher and Matthew. She told him she stayed at the hospital every day. She held them. She prayed over them. She begged God to let them stay. And then one day, they didn't. Both gone. Back to back. Her whole world collapsed. Her heart left her body and never fully returned. And suddenly, it all made sense. Why she showed up. Why she stayed. Why she loved these boys like her soul depended on it. Because in a way it did. She wasn't replacing the children she lost. She was making sure no child under her care ever felt unloved again. Not while she was alive. But before Robert could speak, the nurse stepped forward. Jealousy in her voice. Hands shaking with anger. She accused Diana of being obsessed. Said Diana was trying to take his place. Said Diana wasn't stable. Said this love was too much. And Robert turned to her slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just told her to leave. Right then. Right there. No discussion. Because for the first time in a long time, he saw clearly. Diana was not the danger. She was the blessing. He walked to her and spoke softly. He told her she would never lose Christopher and Matthew. Not again. Not in this lifetime. He told her she didn't just save the boys. She saved him too. Because for years he had money, power, business deals, everything a man could want. But his heart was empty. Diana gave it back. The twins reached out to her. Small hands, full of trust. Matthew whispered one word. It came out shaky, but full of love. He said, "Mama." And she cried. The good kind of crying. The healing kind. Robert knelt beside them. Not as a billionaire. Not as a man trying to hide pain. But as a father. He held them close. And right there, the three of them became a family. Not perfect. Not polished. But real. A year later, everything changed. Christopher could speak full sentences. Matthew was catching up fast. Their wheelchairs didn't limit their joy. They raced around the house, laughing, exploring life at their own pace. Robert still ran his businesses, but now he did it from home. He didn't miss mornings anymore. He didn't miss bedtime. He didn't miss life. And every evening, in that same kitchen that once felt cold and silent, you could find Diana and Robert together with Christopher and Matthew, making dinner, laughing, living, loving, growing. Because sometimes, family isn't built from blood alone. Sometimes, family is built from love that survived pain, from presence that stayed when life got hard, from hearts that refused to give up. This family was proof. The twins were never broken. They were simply waiting for love to unlock what the world couldn't see. And Diana, she was the key.